shock. The Kremlin is opening a new front. Lukashenko is dragging the war in. Russia is preparing a new attack from the territory of Belarus. This is no longer an exercise, but real combat coordination. EU, get ready. Zelensky shocked everyone. The threat is more than real and extremely serious. The offensive will move on to Europe. The Kremlin's decision has been revealed. Details in the report.
Russia is planning to drag Belarus into the war and is already preparing a new attack from its territory this summer. President Zelensky stated this during his speech at the 3C summit. According to him, the planned joint exercises of the aggressor country and its satellite pose a real threat that must be taken seriously. The same kind of exercises, which the participants called just exercises, turned out to be real combat preparations before the invasion of Ukraine. And that's usually how they start a new industry.
This is how her new attacks usually begin. But against whom this time, I don't know. Ukraine, Lithuania, Poland. God willing, it won't happen. But all of you must be prepared. All our institutions are ready to cooperate. Through our intelligence services, we are ready to share information about threats in our region. We also propose to intensify cooperation between security advisors so that each country can help bring this war to an end through diplomatic means.
The Zapad 2025 exercises are scheduled by the countries for September, and this means, according to experts, that the first Russian troops will begin arriving on Belarusian territory as early as July. The total number of troops participating in the exercise has not yet been officially announced. At the beginning of the year, the Belarusians stated that these exercises would be the largest ever. Now, anonymous sources have told the Belarusian opposition media outlet Zerkalo that we are talking about 100,000 military personnel.
According to the information we have received, it is possible that these exercises will take place in so-called triangles. The first triangle is the border area of Belarus, Lithuania, and Poland, the well-known Suwałki corridor. The second triangle is the junction of the borders of Ukraine, Poland, and Belarus. Accordingly, if the main exercises are held there, the European Union will be forced to move its reserves to protect against a possible potential strike at this section of the border. And Ukraine will be forced to deploy part of its reserves to defend the Ukrainian border from the Belarusian side. I'm not ready to say whether aggression will be used or not, but the very fact of creating these threats and risks will lead to certain consequences. Because if Ukraine is forced to pull some of its reserves, it will have fewer forces and capabilities to defend its territories at the front lines and to liberate its territories. I think this might be the intention of both Putin and his ally Lukashenko.
It is known that for the Zapad 2025 exercises, the Belarusians are trying to attract international observers. Already the media are reporting that representatives from Hungary and Slovakia will be monitoring how the Union state plans to advance westward. There were also observers at the large-scale exercises in 2021, and in fact, they were watching the plan for the destruction of Ukraine.
Exercises are a method of putting pressure on countries and clearly demonstrating military capabilities, because after them some kind of ultimatum might be issued, or it could even be announced during these exercises. If it is not accepted, then these exercises could potentially escalate into open aggression or even more serious conflict with significant consequences. In 2022, let me remind you, the exercises began in December 2021. At that time, we heard Putin's ultimatum that NATO must return to the borders of 1997, that the Baltic states must leave NATO, because according to the agreements made when they gained sovereignty and independence after the collapse of the USSR, one of the conditions was that they would not join anti-Russian blocs and would not become members of NATO. And it is precisely from this that the Russian narrative emerges. These exercises also stem from this. As soon as they begin, we will hear a new ultimatum, and the observers will act as agents of influence, telling us that there is such an armada there that we cannot withstand it, and that we should negotiate while there is still room to make concessions.
In an interview with the publication Current Time, representatives of the organization Belpol, founded by former Belarusian security officers who opposed the Lukashenko regime, stated that, in their opinion, the Zapad 2025 exercises themselves are unlikely to pose a direct threat to the Baltic states and Poland. But the military power in Minsk is only gaining momentum.
By the year 2028, Belarus will have the capacity to produce approximately as many as 300,000 rocket projectiles annually for the Grad system, as well as around 450,000 artillery shells each year in total. And in addition, more than 100,000 unmanned aerial vehicles of various types in total. Virtually all Russian equipment, even the very oldest Russian equipment, will be modernized thanks to Belarusian enterprises that produce advanced sights for armored vehicles, for all types of armored vehicles.
The year 2028, that is the year NATO has referred to as the potential year of a confrontation between the alliance and Russia. According to experts, the accuracy of this forecast largely depends on what kind of peace deal the United States manages to impose. Ukrainian experts are less optimistic. According to their forecast, the West could be forced into a confrontation with Russia and its satellites due to their aggression even earlier. And let no one be misled by the fact that even now, the Russians are sending both convicts and cannon fodder recruited from all over the world to the battlefield. The aggressor country, which knows how to wage modern warfare, still has enough resources for aggression. That is why the democratic world must do everything possible to prevent exercises, combat coordination, and therefore aggression from the territory of Belarus. But for now, Ukraine's partners don't even have a unified position on what role Belarus is playing at this stage of the war.
Exclusive Web 2. Ukraine has expanded its own military-industrial complex and is striking harder than ever before. Shocking footage. In Russia, they're already calling this the new web. Airfields, oil refineries and warehouses are burning. Everything is in flames. Ukrainian production is ramping up, and the enemy is feeling it firsthand. You just have to see how the Ukrainian armed forces are tearing the Russians apart.
There it is, look, Grandpa, over here. The main thing is not on us.
A preemptive strike. Before a massive attack by Russian criminals on Ukrainian cities, friendly drones are flying en masse into Russian territory. This is the Bryansk airfield burning. There, a Mi-8 helicopter was destroyed and a Mi-35 was damaged.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
And this is the oil depot in Engels.
We hit it. We hit it. Look, we hit the depot.
This oil depot is not an ordinary one. It is from here that fuel is shipped for Russian bombers. Was shipped. At least 3 storage tanks are on fire. And this is no longer Engels, but Kstovo, a city near Nizhny Novgorod at the Lukoil oil refinery. Drones come and make a turn and locals have time to examine the construction.
So, its engine is at the bay.
It has the engine in the backseat. It's making a circle. They hit us pretty hard.
The oil depot is burning in several places.
The drone just hit Lukoil. Wow!
Lukoil is on fire. Lukoil is burning.
The fire there is just devouring everything.
Another fire. Now this is Crimea, Oktyabrski airfield. After the drone attack, half the sky was covered in thick smoke.
That's it. Oktyabrski airfield is finished.
And this is the explosion of Iskander missile launchers in the Bryansk region. Historic footage. For the first time, Ukrainian forces managed to track and destroy such a high-value target. And finally, this is the Su-35 burning out in the Bryansk region. Just look at how many events there are. And all of this happened just 1 week. Even the explosion on the Kerch Bridge, it feels like that happened a very, very long time ago, but it actually happened just on Monday. And although the occupying authorities claim that everything is fine with the bridge, just look at the lines in Chonga right now. The main traffic, the Russians are trying to route not through the Kerch Bridge. And this is already a classic move from the SBU. In this service, they deliberately wait a few days for the Russians to react, and then the reaction comes in their foreign ministry, and not just anyone. Deputy Minister Sergei Ryabkov denies that Ukrainian drones destroyed 4 dozen strategic bombers and other aircraft. As he wrote, there is nothing even remotely like that. And after this statement, the SBU released this video showing dozens of burning aircraft. Here you can clearly see how the drones take off from a truck and calmly pick their target. And no one even tries to shoot them down. The Russians are trying to hide the scale of the disaster. They dragged old, supposedly decommissioned planes to the site of the destroyed ones. Look, everything is in place. And the surviving aircraft were relocated to the most remote airfields. They even found one Tu-160 all the way in Anadyr. That's 6,600 kilometers from Ukraine. And most importantly, there isn't a single road near that airfield. It's impossible to get there with a truck carrying drones. They've literally driven their planes to the edge of the world. There's a 10-hour time difference. Just think about it. Only a week ago, the Russians were calmly, openly delivering missiles to the airfields, and today they're hiding the planes themselves at the edge of the world. By the way, trucks, obviously, they are becoming that trump card which the President of the United States, Donald Trump, questioned us about so persistently and for so long. Just think about it. It was a truck that delivered explosives to that very Kerch Bridge in 2023. And in 2025, trucks brought in hundreds of drones that destroyed part of the enemy's strategic aviation. But what are we supposed to do when we aren't given long-range missiles? So then how are we supposed to deliver explosives to enemy depots, oil storage facilities, and airfields? Notice that almost none of the world leaders are eager to comment on the special operation Web. They are still shocked by the ingenuity of the Ukrainian special services. This is a new tactic that forces all of them to come up with new ways to counter such special operations. But the Ukrainians keep coming up with new ones. On Saturday, dozens of drones flew out from several cars of a military train, destroying almost all the military equipment, 13 tanks and several other armored vehicles. You could call it Web 2. And by the way, it was the occupiers themselves who reported this.
Israel, Ukraine's covert ally, surprised everyone. Incredible facts have surfaced about Israel transferring Patriots to Ukraine. Tel Aviv's secret game has been exposed. More and more evidence points to covert support for Ukraine's air defense. All the cards are on the table. What is Israel planning and how will it affect the war? We explain in this episode. Patriot air defense systems in Ukraine, the Israeli connection and Tel Aviv's response, information about the possible transfer of Patriot air defense systems from Israel to Ukraine has sparked a wave of conflicting statements. Initially, it was reported that these systems could reach Ukraine through third countries, particularly through the United States of America. However, the Israeli Foreign Ministry officially denied that such a transfer had taken place. According to experts, there are many indications that the Patriot systems could indeed have been sent from Israeli territory. Stockpiles of weapons belonging to the United States Central Command are stored in warehouses in Israel. These arsenals have been used before, including to supply the military needs of US allies. This may refer to air defense missile systems that were supplied to Israel back in the early 1990s during the Gulf War. At that time, the United States provided protection for the Jewish state against possible attacks from Saddam Hussein in exchange for Israel's neutrality. These systems were new at the time, but have become significantly outdated since then. Israel has developed its own modern multi-layered air defense system, which includes components such as the Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow. Now, the old weaponry no longer holds strategic value for Israel and, according to analysts, has been returned to the United States. The American side has since disposed of it at their own discretion. Part of it was transferred to European allies, while another portion may have ended up in Ukraine. Israel, for its part, has formally distanced itself from this process, citing a desire to maintain neutrality. Israel, Russia, and Iran. A fragile balance in the Middle East. Israel's refusal to directly acknowledge the transfer of weapons is linked to its sensitive foreign policy position. Experts agree that Israel is not interested in escalating tensions with Russia, especially given Moscow's active support of Iran. Today, Russia and Iran are closely cooperating, exchanging technologies including in the defense sector and, according to some reports, in the nuclear field as well. Experts note that Iran has already accumulated a sufficient stockpile of enriched uranium to produce nuclear weapons. This changes the strategic balance across the entire Middle East. According to analysts, it is in Russia's interest to prolong negotiations around Iran's nuclear program. Russia is not interested in either returning to the nuclear deal with the United States or in a military strike on Iran's facilities. A protracted diplomatic process is the most optimal scenario for Moscow. At the same time, Israel views Iran's nuclear ambitions as a direct threat. Israel maintains a cautious stance despite the tensions. The Israeli leadership prefers not to escalate conflicts with Russia to the level of open diplomatic confrontation. Israel avoids drastic measures such as summoning the Russian ambassador or making public accusations. Experts attribute this caution to a desire not to open a new front amid internal and external challenges. The situation is further complicated by the fact that Russia actively supports forces hostile to Israel, such as Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Syrian regime. Moreover, after the weakening of Iran's presence in Syria, Turkey is becoming increasingly active in the region, which also requires Israel to engage in complex diplomatic maneuvering. Society and politics different reactions. While Israel's official position remains neutral, public opinion is clearly on the side of Ukraine. Israeli society expresses strong sympathy for Ukrainians and their struggle against Russian aggression. This creates a certain internal dissonance between the government's position and the sentiments of its citizens. At the same time, a Ukrainian MiG-29 carried out a precision airstrike in the Zaporizhzhia direction. There, on the Zaporizhzhia front, a MiG-29 fighter jet of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Air Force successfully struck an enemy UAV operator's command post. The strike was carried out with guided aerial bombs with high precision. After the command post was hit, a second bomb destroyed an ammunition depot and the occupier's fuel and lubricant reserve. The operation became yet another example of the effective use of precision weaponry against the enemy's critical targets. Success was achieved thanks to modern armaments and the coordinated actions of the armed forces. At the same time, in the Donetsk region, a Russian Pion self-propelled artillery unit worth over $1 million was destroyed. Aerial reconnaissance units of the Black Forest Brigade detected the enemy's Pion self-propelled guns and adjusted fire onto its position. Thanks to coordination with adjacent units, the installation was destroyed by a precise strike. the self-propelled artillery unit, worth over $1 million, was turned into a pile of scrap metal. This successful operation once again confirms the effectiveness of Ukrainian intelligence and artillery in detecting and destroying the enemy's expensive equipment. At the same time, regarding the issue of a Russian landing in the south is impossible. There are no submarines in the Black Sea, and any landing operation is doomed to fail. Amid statements about a possible attempt by Russia to attack Odessa, experts agree on one thing. At this moment, not a single Russian submarine or surface ship capable of supporting a landing operation has been detected in the Black Sea. The last departures of minesweepers from Sevastopol took place several months ago. And since then, in open waters, the Russians have only deployed small boats like the Raptor or Grashonok, which serve exclusively patrol functions. This indicates a loss of control over the waters and a fear of Ukrainian means of destruction. As for the possibility of a landing operation on Ukraine's southern coast, experts believe this is a completely unrealistic scenario. An amphibious operation requires significant superiority, thorough preparation, and maritime dominance, none of which are currently present. The route to Odessa passes through dense fortifications and defensive lines, as well as at least 3 water barriers, which simply makes rapid and undetected advancement impossible. Moreover, the large landing ships of the Russian Black Sea Fleet are in critical condition. Due to the lack of spare parts and sanctions, their repair is virtually impossible, which simply renders these vessels unfit for combat use. All of this once again confirms that the scenario of a naval invasion in southern Ukraine is more propaganda than reality. That's all for today. Tune in tomorrow for more news.